Shabbat Shalom. In the end of this week's Torah portion, Beshalach, the Jewish people complain for water. Moshe brings water from the rock, and immediately afterwards, Amalek attacks the Jewish people from behind. Rashi comments, Vayavo Amalek. Amalek came and attacked the Jewish people. Rashi's bothered by why does this come right after the story of Moshe bringing water from the rock for the Jewish people. So Rashi says, Lo mar tamid ani beinechem umezumen l'chol tzarchechem. It comes to tell us that God says to the Jewish people, I'm among you, and I'm providing for you. Vatem omrim, and you say, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu emayin? Is God with us or not? Chayechem she'akelev ba v'nashech etchem. Because you don't recognize me, you don't see me, that I'm there for you, a dog is going to come and bite you. And then you will cry to me, and you'll say, where are you? Mashal Adam Shehirchiv Beno al Ktefa v'yetz l'derech. Rashi says it's like the parable of a man who had his child on his shoulders, and they went out on the road. Hayoto aben roach chafetz v'omer. He saw something, the child, from upon his father's shoulders, and he said, Abba tol chafetz zeh v'tein li. Take that object and give it to me. Hu noten lo. And the father picks it up and gives it to the son on his shoulders. V'chein shniya v'chein shlishis. And it happens a second time and a third time. Pagu adam echad. And somebody's passing by and bumps into them. Amrlo, and the child looks down and says to the person who was coming the other way, Ra'ita Adaba, have you seen my father? Amrlo Aviv, the father says to the child, don't you know where I am? You're on my shoulders. So the father puts him down. And what happens? The child isn't protected anymore, and a dog came and bit the child. So at first it seems like a cruel mashal, a cruel parable. It's not what a father's supposed to do, put the child down and stop protecting them. But I think there's something deeper going on here. The child on the father's shoulders feels omnipotent. The child cannot see the father, takes the father so for granted because the father is part of the child. When a child's at a very early stage of development, when they're young, they actually don't see themselves as separate from the parent. The parent does everything for them and they just take for granted that's how the world works. Don't really even realize that they're separate from the parent. The question itself, where is my father, indicates a new stage of psychological development for the child. The child suddenly realizes they are not the father's not them. They're separate from the father. On the one hand, to be separate is, I think the Midrash is telling us, to be subject to the pains of the world. But ironically, this also enables the child to see the Father. And of course, it's all a metaphor for the Jewish people and God. In other words, we become separate from God. That's a bad thing because we become subject to the vicissitudes of the world, existential conflicts, difficulties. On the other hand, it's only by becoming separate from God that we can actually see God. Only by us becoming mature, differentiated, then we can become individuals who are responsible for our spiritual life. And we can encounter God in an adult way, in a different way. Ultimately, this child being separate from the parent, yes, that's difficulty. Yes, the child will get bit by the dog, but ultimately the child can re-encounter the father in a deeper way. And I think that's part of what's going on here for the Jewish people. The Jews are like children coming out of Egypt, and the 40 years in the desert is going to be a process of their maturity. And this is a very early stage in that, where they at first just begin to say, where is God? To just ask the question of where is God is to come to realize that you're not taking God for granted, that you are not God, that God is not you. And ultimately that will lead the Jewish people to be able to have a deeper encounter with the divine. We're at a time when we do feel sometimes that God is not so present. Difficult times, perhaps for many of us as individuals and for the whole world. There's a lot of suffering going on in the world. And the hope, I think, is that even though we say at this moment, where is God? Have you seen my Father? But hopefully that, like in the mashal of the child, like for the Jewish people, it can lead us to a new level of maturity as individuals, as a community, as a world, perhaps to re-encounter the divine in a new way. Shabbat Shalom.